This is our 2020 Collegiate Judging Clinic. So the special thanks go to the NAJ Education Committee, which it was their idea to have this clinic. And Marilyn Bliley and Denise Green really took the initiative to get this organized and ready and advertised so that you could participate. And then Jenna, God love her, she has done all of this work, getting all of our videos uploaded and our slide presentations uploaded. And she did some practice sessions with us, and we really have appreciated all of the work that she has done. And then our 4 clinicians, of course, Paul, Linda, Priscilla Hickey, and myself. And then Lois Coburn, our national assigner. Lois, we want to not only thank her for her help with this particular session, but for all the work that she has been doing since last May to get the new system running, jazz system running on Road to Nationals, and then dealing with all of the unusual complexities of assigning this year. Lois is going to join us at the very end and give you kind of an update on where we're at with assigning and what's happening, and more importantly, why it's been taking so long, because there is some context to this that would help, I think, understand and make some of the frustrations a little bit more tolerable. Whenever we have a scoring panel, we always refer to them as they. They had a, and so these are the theys this time. We had Marilyn and Laura. Well, I'm going to let you just read the list there. You can see everybody who's on that list. And they scored the routines. And then the next thing that happened is we took the routines and took the average of the scores of all those people who judged. So you will be seeing those scores, and we thank them so much for their work. We have 2 sessions planned for our clinic this time. Today we're doing vault and beam practice judging, and then we're going to cover, I think that's something you'll find interesting. It's the evaluative feedback that coaches have given judges during the last year, the 2019 season, 2020 season actually. The coaches evaluate the judges after every meet, and we were able to put together a kind of a aggregated version of that. And we thought it would be very helpful if you could see the kinds of comments that the coaches made. So many of the things that they say are positive. I mean, for the most part, we're getting really positive evaluations from our coaches. But some of the things that they say are instructive in terms of things that we could actually easily fix. I mean, it's not like there's anything really that couldn't be fixed if you know about it. So our job today is we're going to make sure that you know about it. And then at the very end, Lois is going to join us, as I said. On the 13th of December, we'll do bars and floor. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the meet referee rules. And there's a couple of them that are new this year. And we're going to give our best interpretation of what those mean. And then also talk about some of our observations that the coaches have been making related to COVID. Okay, and then Lois might come back and join us again in a few weeks because she can give us another update on where we're at. Our goals for this clinic are literally to provide a brush up for the college season. We want to help you avoid first meet mistakes. And when we go through the evaluation process, what we noticed was that most of the comments about judges making mistakes were in the month of January, when we first come in and the rules are new and we aren't quite used to using them yet. So we want to make sure that we try to be ready for those first meets in January. And then we just thought that this would be a good way to engage our judges before the season started. As I said, the scores are based on a panel of the experienced judges. We use the average. We're only going to be providing you with 1 score, not a range of scores. So unless there were 2 different start values that were possible, depending on where you were sitting or seeing the element from. So you will see 1 score. And then we tried to use the first look scoring, meaning that we tried not to watch them over and over again and then adjust our scores. And a couple of times we had to go back and look. So we won't say that we did it 100% of the time, but we did try to give you the first look scoring so it would be more realistic as what we do in a meet. Each of the presenters is going to talk about the specific rules for their event. I'm just going to cover a few that are general. And if you've already taken the test, you'll have recognized these because these are, of course, on the test. We're only supposed to use the NCAA specific special requirement in composition deductions. All the other JO requirements and compositions do not apply. The NCAA has some specific rules. We have a 9.4 start value on our 3 events, bars, beam, and floor. There's a deduction of 1/10 for competing out of order, and the choice of element is very specifically defined for each event, and each presenter will go over that, but it's a flat 1/10 deduction. Some scoring considerations, particularly when we've been talking with coaches. Most of our competitions now are either televised or they're streamed. So what that means is that everybody who's out there watching it thinks they're a judge. And some of them are, many of them are judges, but some of them aren't judges. And so but they're all watching and commenting and making assessments as to what, not only about what the athlete did, but how we did. So basically the moral of that story is if we see a deduction, we absolutely have to take it because they can do that. They have the advantage of instant replay. They can play that thing over and over again often. So occasionally you'll hear criticisms that the judging may be high or not be taking, we're not taking a deduction in their mind. There was an obvious step. Well, it may or may not have been such an obvious step because as we know, sometimes we can't actually see those things. But the major point here is just to remember that other people are scoring those routines just as much as we are. But it's really only our scores that are counting from the vantage point we have. Sometimes they don't understand that. College gymnastics is really so much fun to judge, as we all know. That's why we do it. But those college athletes are typically the very best of the best. And so because of that, our scores do tend to be higher. They tend to be more expressive and more artistic on floor and on beam. And on bars, they're trying harder to get right into vertical on handstand. And they often are more dynamic vaulters as well. So because of that, our scores do tend to be higher than we would typically see in a regular JO meet. So what we have to do, though, is remember that we don't have very much room because they're all pretty good. So we have to be sure to be consistent within the teams and across the teams and the divisions. And when we get to the section on the evaluation comments from coaches, this area right here is the area that I think they made the most comments on. It had to do with consistency across teams and across Division 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk more about that later. And with that, we just hope you can sit back, get your pencils or iPads or whatever it is you're using to judge and enjoy.
Today, we're going to talk about balance beam. I'm going to do a quick review of what it is we're looking for versus the, I say WD-40 group, which is the Women's Development Program, because I can't remember Women's Development Program because it's not JO anymore, versus college, because there are some changes, and those are going to be the things that are going to mess us up while we're judging. So we'll cover some of that. And then we're going to judge routines. And so you'll need your pencil and paper. And we will go over the script with the deductions that were taken by the panel. Cookie already talked about the panel that evaluated them all. We took the average score as the final score. And then we'll talk about that. And of course, you might have been a little bit higher, a little bit lower. That's judging. So I'm going to start with our special requirements. Just quick review. They need their acro series of 2 flight elements, and 1 has to be a C. Remember, the mount can be included. So they might do a round off back handspring mount C into a back handspring on the beam, or a front tuck something, front handspring step out into a something. So those would count in their acro series. Or an acro connection of an A dance to a C acro. So we don't see that much, but everyone kind of thinks about the anodi, which is an E if she did a jump and then landed and did the anodi, that would also count as her acro, an A acro, I'm sorry, A acro to a C, an E acro. So the acro series may not be connected to the dismount. So there's an example there for you of the back handspring layout step out to the full twist dismount, which is the B. You cannot count that series as her acro series. That's her dismount. So she has to have a different acro series. Remember, all of our special requirements are only 2/10, not 5, like the age group level. And then this is something brand new for this year. They need to have a dance series with a C in it, or they could have a dance acro, or I like to say mixed series. And the dance skill must be a C. So the examples there, you see a switch leap C to the layout step out D, that would count as her dance acro series because the switch leap is a C. But if she did a front aerial to a split jump, that would not count because the dance is a B. So that's going to be something new to look for. And I actually kind of like that idea because it's going to give a little more variety. So that was a new change for this year. We have to have our leap or jump with 180 split. And of course, that can be anywhere. It can be in a series, in a mixed series, or all by itself. We're seeing a lot of athletes now do things like switch leap with half turns, split half turns, popas, high level leaps and jumps that have the split requirement that are isolated. And that's okay too for that requirement, provided they have something else that has a C dance with either another dance or an acro. We have the full turn on one foot, the same as always. You can't do something with hand support. And then we have the dismount requirement, a C dismount or a B preceded by a D acro. So she could do the layout step out to the full, and that would count for her dismount requirement. She could do an aerial, front aerial, or a side aerial to the back full, and that would count as her dismount requirement. So those are our special requirements. Now let's review our composition quickly. And remember, this is the only composition that we have for NCAA. We can't apply anything else from the age group program. So missing a backward acro, 1/10 flat. Missing a forward or sideward acro, 1/10 flat. That would be from group 1, 6, 7, 8, your mounts, your rolls, your cartwheels, your saltos. And that's where that has to come from. Most of them that tumble into the dismount do a round off, and a round off, of course, counts as a sideward skill. Insufficient distribution of elements is still there as an 05 flat deduction for college. You have to look at everything that's in the routine and decide, does it really go like really front end loaded or back end loaded, or are the difficulties spaced throughout the routine? And I don't see this as being taken very much anymore. Level changes on beam is a flat 05. Let's say the gymnast mounts the beam with a tuck jump on the end of the beam. She didn't do a front support. She was never low on the beam ever. And you could take the 05. We are looking for level changes of high leaps and jumps, low turns and poses and things that are down on the beam. But just like in the age group program, you only need to do that one time to fulfill. Space and use of the length of the beam. Little kids we see do everything like in one little section of the beam. Not so much in the college group, but you might see somebody that is doing everything between the two upright bases, and you could look at that 05. The choreography, and this is something we are going to look at today because there are going to be routines that are still missing some of the choreography. And the choreography of forward, sideward, and backward is a total of 05. So you don't take 05 for each one of those that might be missing. You take flat 05 if any one of them is missing. everybody pretty much has forward choreography. It's the sideward and the backward that you try to notate on your paper. So if they're missing one of those, you take the 05, and then that whole category has been taken. I find that there are some that are missing side and some that are missing backward. And just to clarify, what does that mean? These are non-value parts. So these are the dance steps, the grapevine walks, the things that they do, and they turn and they pose and they step sidewards. They don't just stand at the back of the beam and tap their foot on the end of the beam to do their dismount. That's not choreography. So we're looking for that in college as well as the age group program. Now we have the UTL, the up to the level. So it's the flat 1/10, and it's pretty well defined. If they have a flight series without bonus, without any connective value on the beam, then they must have an additional DE acro. So they have to have an aerial or a layout step out, or a front tuck or something like that, or an E dance, including the mount and dismount. So you'll see that maybe somebody has a flip-flop layout and then they have maybe a switch leap back tuck. Well, there isn't another DE in there, but she does a double back dismount. So the dismount will count for up to the level. All right. So we will see some of that in our video. A DE acro directly connected to the dismount will not count, just like that series you see there, flip-flop, layout, step out, full twist. Okay, that is not counting in that compositional UTL. That layout, step out, that's the D, does not count for this category. She must have something else. Connection value for NCAA. And we know this is not different. There will be no bonus awarded with a B dismount. So she does that layout step out like in that last graphic into the full. There is no bonus there. There is no bonus for a 2 acro flight with the BC salto. So that would mean flip-flop layout step out for them is a B plus D, but for bonus principles, we count the layout step out as a C. So there is no bonus for that series. A B plus D acro flight, if she does a back handspring and a layout stretched from 2 feet pike down, that would be a 1/10 connection value. So you want to see the layout stretch through the vertical before she pikes down in order to call it that layout. And then another just reminder is this was from a year ago. The back layout step out and also the aerial walkover will receive D difficulty, but will be considered a C for connection in a back handspring series. So they do that front aerial back handspring, and that gets the D, but no connection value. And that became pretty popular. I guess that's why they changed it. So now here's an extra bonus, though. Now, you know, we started at 9.4 now, and as soon as we started at 9.4, they added back in other ways to get more bonus. So it's not going to hurt a lot of people at the top end, that 9.4 start. It's going to maybe hurt some of the people at the lower end of difficulty that they have in their routine. So if she does a 3-element acro series that includes a C, she gets an additional 1/10 connection value. So flip-flop, 2-foot flip-flop, back pike, BBC. She gets that connection bonus for that, which is 1, plus she gets an additional 1/10 for connection value. So that was another plus. Here's the one that I forgot at least 3 times when we started judging these routines. So I'm cautioning you, be better than me. Now, if they do a B or higher acro skill into a C dismount, they get a 10th bonus. We don't get that in the age group program. So example, round off, 1.5 twist. How many times do you see that? Thousands. That now gets +1. Another example that we're not used to, of course, she could do round off double full, +1. One that we will see is the girls that do a back handspring in the middle of the beam to the gainer full off the side. B plus C gets a +1. So we're going to have to stay awake for those because, boy, that caught me off guard multiple times. Or if they do a C or higher dance skill into a C dismount, they get +1. Switch leg leap to that gainer full off the side, assuming she has got on the right foot and everything. Or switch leg leap, step, back pike gainer off the end would get another 1/10. So these are new ways for them to up that 9-4 start and get to their 10-0. So I caution you to remember that because I forgot. We are going to go to the video, so get your pencils ready and paper, and we're going to see beam routine number 1, and then we'll go back and talk about it, and we'll talk about the scores and the deductions. Okay, let's talk about it. There were some different things there. A couple things before we talk about this. I just want to remind us that in college, we don't count pivot turns. And you'll see that a lot of the college girls are still using a lot of pivot turns. This video is a little older, so maybe those have all weeded themselves out now, but we don't deduct for those. Concentration pauses are a thing. So we may be having some rhythm and concentration pauses. So let's look at this girl. She started with an A mount. She did a D aerial. We had an 05 deduction for balance. She had a full turn, little backward movement there. Switch leap straddle jump, lacking 05 in her split positions or uneven legs for +1. Then she did a Sisson, which was lacking a little split, into the layout step out, which was another bonus, +1 and a D. And we did have low tempo in between the two. She did a kick over front for 1/10, had a balance error. Then a 1/10 concentration pause before the dismount. She had some kind of rhythm throughout, I felt like, but you can write your little R's on your paper, but make sure you take the whole one when it's really there. So overall, she had 2 B's, 2 C's, and 3 D's, and we had 6/10 in total bonus. So we added all that up from a 9-4 to a 10, except no acro series. So she had no acro series, so -2/10, so a 9/8 start. So because she had no acro series, she also had the UTL of 1/10. So we had to take that off. She didn't have a ton of extra execution, but she had enough. We also did not see any sideward choreography. We saw backward and forward. So we have the flat 05. So her feet kind of bothered me throughout. Took an overall 05 for feet. And so that came to 7/10 altogether, including the UTL. So our end score was a 9-1. Time to judge. All right. 895 was our score. I'll throw that up there right away. Let's talk about her execution and what she got credit for. She did a mount that was an A. She had the flip-flop layout step out, which had some legs on the back handspring, and then balance air on the layout step out of 2/10, full turn, a little bit flat in my opinion. Switch leap in the aerial cartwheel. There was one of those new things. If she didn't have the other dance series, this would have counted as her dance or mixed. But we had a little lacking split in the switch leg leap. And then the aerial, she bent over and touched the beam. We took 3. And I also have a tempo in the middle there because it was not connected as smoothly as it could. She did a front tuck from 2 feet, which is an E, and we had an 05 deduction on that. The cat leap was poor into the switch side. We took a 1. You know, in college, a 1/10 is a big deduction, and that 3/10 was a killer. So we had 1 on the cat leap. She didn't have both legs up in the air at the same time. It didn't have a lot of amplitude, but it was still an A. And to the switch side, which had 05, was a little uneven. And then she did a punch front off 2 feet full at the end, and it was just lacking a little bit of height. So her bonus was the D layout, the C to D connection plus the D, and the cat leap into the switch side and the E. So she had plenty of bonus. She had 7/10. So she had a 10-0, she had her accuracy, she had her dance, she had her turn, she had her dismount. So we did have a lot of execution now. So it came to about 1.05. And included in that was an 05 for overall rhythm and 05 for feet. So hopefully that made sense to everyone. It was not a stellar routine.
Linda, before I have 2 things. One, there is a question in the prior script.
Okay.
So I want to do that really quick first. And then 2, on this routine, after we do the script, can we replay it just so people can see it?
Sure.
But in terms of the last script, we have a question for routine 1.
Okay.
And they want to know, did you deduct 0.2 in comp and 0.2 from the start value for missing the series?
No, just the 0.2 for the acro series, not there. That was off start value. That was just on the script. It was just notating that that's what that was. But it did come only off the start value 1 time. So 9/8 start. And then the other total deductions came to 7/10, and that included the 1/10 UTL. Let's look at what was strange about this routine was that there were only 8 elements in the routine. It seemed so short. She did what she needed to do and got off the beam. So she had her side choreography right away at the beginning. She did flip-flop layout step out. I felt she had bent arms on each of the flip-flops, so 05, and the layout was solid. Switch leap into straddle 3/4, C to D, a little tempo in between, otherwise pretty clean, full turn. And then I did take a concentration pause, which isn't on the script here, before the dismount. And she did round off double back, so she had BE. So I did have a total of 0.45 in deductions. So she had nothing backward choreography-wise. The only thing she did was tap her foot on the end of the beam before the dismount, and that just can't count. So I did have another 10th that isn't shown there. So plus bonus, she had 5 in CV and 4 in DV. I guess she didn't need to do anything else, and she made it all. So it was fairly clean. We ended up with a 955 for a score. And the dismount was her biggest deduction, and it was body posture and step. So 0.15. You might have taken 2 on the dismount. You might have taken 0.25 on the dismount. You might have taken a little more somewhere else, but it was a very clean routine, and there wasn't much in it. So she didn't mess around for you to take more deductions.
There's a question, is the mountain A?
No, it was not. And they follow the same rules that we do in the age group program for, there's that really nice chart that somebody made with all the A mounts on it. It pretty much has to be on that sheet. And that one was not.
Yes,
oh, okay.
Karen. The B plus E in the dismount, it just wasn't on the sheet, right? But
yes. And that is another bonus. You're right. Oh, you know what? That was my second.
But I think if you counted it in the total,
because
you have 5 CV in the total, I think it just transferred to the.
So the total is right. It was my scripting that was not. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll fix it.
We have a couple more coming in. So someone asking about to define backward choreography. That does not include the backward acro series, correct?
No, its choreography is movements in the routine that are not value parts. Okay, so if it's a back layout, it's not a movement, that's an element. So it's not an element, it's the dance, it's the connections, it's the steps and the poses, and it should be more than just a look to the side. Whereas her mount, she actually did a little stag thing over the beam and then did something else. And a lot of those little mounts that they do like a stag sit, that they jump up from the side, if they stay there and do a little arm movement and something else, it could count as side choreography. But in this case, it did, but in many others, it does not, like the girl before. I think that was the one right before this, or the first girl. Second girl, it was an A. Yeah. First girl was not.
And one other one, just to clarify, on the acro series, the 1/10 is for the BBC, and then the 10th is for the 3 series. So there's a 2.
Correct. Yes. So she got the 1/10 for the BBC, or D if you call it that, and then the other 1/10 for the 3-element acro series with a C. And then she, of course, gets the D. All right, number 4, 965. Because these routines that we're using were developed and competed on a different set of rules, so we're finding a few different things that are wrong or different from what we have this year. But overall, this girl had her 10-0 start. She had everything. She wasn't missing anything. The mount was not an A, but it could be a sideward choreography. She did the little beat jump into the double staggering for a little lacking position of 05. Her cat leap was better than the last cat leap, so we only took 05 on this one into the aerial. She had a little backward choreography there and a full turn, so that was okay. She attempted the split full, which we gave E, but we took 05 for lacking split and 05 for a little incomplete. Then the flip-flop layout step out, and then the bonus dismount, the round off into the 1.5 twist. So +1 for that. So she had 3 in CV, 5 in Ds. Our whole deductions only came to 0.35, so she was a 965. It was a very straightforward routine. I think the iffiest part was the connection of the beat jump into the double stag ring, which it was not a terrific double stag ring, but and you might add a little tempo in between there. She had a better connection in the cat leap into the aerial cartwheel than the last girl that did the cat leap into the switch side. And then there's that bonus dismount that I probably will miss a whole bunch of times. So I'm going to have to practice a lot of times before I actually judge live, because I'm not going to give it at the JO program, and I'm going to give it here, the bonus. Any questions on that one? All right, so think about the ones we've seen so far, and where does this one fall into place? Is it first, second, third, last, whatever? This is our 5th one. We are hoping you have this one first. So here's our script. We had a 9-8 for a score. She had everything she needed. She had 8 in bonus, but she did the little chest stand mount, which is an A. She did BBD for her series, so she got the +1 for the series plus the extra 1 for the 3 element. The front aerial to the beat jump. The beat jump could have been a little bit bigger, so we took 05. The acro series was quite nice. Switch leap into the straddle quarter, which was kind of like in between. So it was the direction of the straddle quarter, 05. Full turn, we're picking for things here. And then she did the aerial D into the full dismount, and noticed that she never joined her feet when she landed. So she didn't slide those heels together. We took 05. So we only had a total of 2 tenths. She did not have any sideward choreography, because this routine was probably composed before they cared about that. So I also would have pointed out that I could have maybe had an 05 for overall rhythm, with just the little pauses between things, but it was a very clean routine. So hopefully everybody had this as their best. I think we're running out of time. Do we need to do one more, or should we go to vault?
You can do one more, I think, okay. Given technical difficulties. I just want a reminder, because I see the questions popping into the chat, that for the back handspring series, the step out is a C.
Correct.
emphasis of connection value.
Right. It gets the BBC connection value, but it gets the additional +1. But she also gets the D for the layout step out. So that's just a college rule.
And then we have a couple other questions I think we already answered, but just to have it here, this straddle side does not count towards sideward choreography
because it's an element. Correct.
And then we had a couple of people that had some concentration pauses.
And you could have. I wrote rhythm before the flip-flop series myself on my paper, and let's see, where else? Let me get the right paper. And one also before the dismount. So you might have had an 05 total, maybe. I never took a 1, but you could have had a 975 score if you took an overall rhythm of 05. So you can lump together those basic little rhythm things if you need to, but if you get to the 1001, 1002, then you take the flat 1. Hopefully that helps. And again, this is what the panel took. So we did not take those there, but me personally, I wrote little R's on my paper 2 times. Okay, this one had a little tricky thing in there, so we'll see if we caught it. So she started with the pike jump into the back pike and got +1. We had a little body posture on the pike there. Then the flip-flop layout step out had some feet issues, 05. She did a front tuck from 2 feet, which is an E, into the beat jump, and we had 05, 05 on each of those, amplitude mostly. And then she did the switch leap, which she was planning to connect to the other dance skills, but she stopped and had a bobble. So we had 05 on that and 05 for the balance air. And then she did a straddle jump B into a split jump B. We had a tempo air. We had lack of split on both of those. And then she did the round off double full for +1 at the end, which is a tough dismount and a little bit of a bounce at the end of it, small hop with the legs. So what happened was she had 6 in bonus to get to her 10-0, but she had no dance series because what was left after the switch leap when she stopped were 2 Bs, and you must have a C in the dance series. You must have a C dance in there. So whether she did a dance or a dance acro, there has to be a C, and she messed that up. So she only had a 9/8 start.
So I think people clarify, just because we're getting some questions,
yes,
that in the dance or mixed series, the dance element has to be
correct. The dance
so all of the other ones she did, the back, the pike to pike, and the front to beat jump can't count.
They can't count because there's no C dance. The only C dance was a switch leg leap, and it was by itself, which of course counts as a 180-degree split for that special requirement, but it is not in a series. So that 2/10 for no dance series comes off the start value for a 9/8 start. And then our total deductions were 0.6, which includes 0.05 for no backward choreography. And I was checking the chat, and it seems like there's still confusion. So let's remember that the dance and the connecting movements that they do is where we look at the choreography. The skills don't count for the choreography. They could do a side straddle jump, but then maybe she needs to do a side lunge out of the straddle jump with a pose or something, so that then it would be a sideward choreography. Whereas we didn't have anything here in backward, no backward in this one. So 9.2 was her final score. So we did have quite a range. 9.8 was our highest score. The 8.95 was our lowest score, but those routines had issues. And this routine had the 2/10 special requirement missing. We had our very first girl that didn't have a special requirement, no acro series of 2/10 plus the up to the level. So it was really 3 for her. So then we had our 9.55-ish. We had a 9.65. So we kind of had a good range of scores, I hope. Any other questions about BEAM? Because I'm going to turn it back over to probably Paul.
To Paul.
Maybe? Yes.
Hi, everyone. This is Paul Padron. I'm so excited to be here with you and talking about something that I love so much, which is vault, and especially NCAA vault. So a couple of fun facts, vaulting fun facts. If you were to time the vault from the time they touch the table to the time they land on the mat, it would be no more than 1.25 seconds. There's a lot to look for in such a short time. I look at vault like a little mini routine. From the time they leave the board to the time they land on the mat and present, that's a really short little routine. And with NCAA, what's even more fun is they only do one vault. So you got to get it right on that first time. The NCAA vaulter, and Cookie touched upon this a little bit, because of their age or experience, they are very confident, they're very focused, very fast, very strong. They're able to do some incredible things, and they usually perform pretty solid vaults most of the time. So it's important that we capture not only the large errors, but also the small errors in order to ensure that the best vault wins. I'm a former teacher, former principal, and so I start everything with some objectives. What I'm hoping will happen after this presentation is I hope you understand the importance of evaluating all the phases of the vault. That you feel more confident in applying the deductions. You'll be able to separate good from great and be comfortable in judging vault.
Okay, so back to NCAA vaulting. The gymnast perform one vault. The gymnast is allowed 3 attempts to complete one vault. A little bit different here. A gymnast must actually go over the table for it to count as a vault. So like I said earlier, if she gets up there, goes into a support phase, but doesn't go over, it counts as one of her 3 attempts. The JO vault bonus rules are not in effect for the NCAA. And vault numbers are to be flashed using the NCAA vault chart. That's Appendix A in the rules of modifications. If a vault is not in there, you have to submit the vault that you want evaluated to the board of directors to receive a start value. As far as some NCAA vault deductions, it's a little bit different than some of our JO. They're touching the table with 1 or no hands. That's a 1-point deduction, and that's taken by each judge. Failure to land on the soles of feet first, which includes the fall, very different from JO, and that's a 1.0 deduction by each judge. And then spotting assistance, 1.0 deduction by each judge. If scores are out of range, then a conference will be called, which may be an issue if somebody saw one hand and the other judge did not. If the gymnast vaults prior to the judge's signal, the vault gets repeated, but she will have a 0.5 deduction off the average by the chief judge. So let's talk about vaulting and what great vaults have. So a great vault has a rival with arms, straight arms, open shoulders, and head alignment. Of course, the lead arm, bend exception there's a Sukahara vault, the lead arm can have a slight bend in it. Great vaults get off vertically, usually by vertical. They have exceptional height. Action happens at the apex. The apex is that circle right here that happens at the top of that apex. Body position is exact. A tuck is a tuck. A layout is a layout, and a pike is a pike. there has great distance and great landing. So I talked about open shoulders will get good head alignment. So I used two of the world's best gymnasts to show this. So here we have Michaela and we have Simone. If you watch them coming in, they have fully extended shoulders, open shoulders on the Yuroshenko position. Their head's in line. Could be a little bit tighter with the legs. That's a slow motion picture there. But otherwise, full extension. I said they have exceptional height. So here you see Michaela, and you see how far her feet are from that table. And you see Simone, and she's up pretty high there also. Action at the apex of the vault. So they're doing aminars in both of these vaults, which is a 2.5 twist. And I have captured that in slow motion at the end of their 2.5. So you can see they have completed 2.5 twists, and they're on the way down. They haven't done the twist on the way down. They've completed it and are now dropping to their landing position. And exceptional distance. You see Michaela is pretty far from the table, and Simone is so far that the table wasn't even in the picture. So let's get ready to adjust some NCAA vaults. We're going to take a couple of seconds. Go ahead and take a couple of seconds. Get your judging papers ready. We'll be judging 6 vaults. Prior to each vault, I will give you the vault number and start value. We will play the vault in regular speed. Then we'll give you 30 seconds to come up with your score. There is a timer in each video. I will then share the average score of the 11 evaluators. I will go over the deductions based on my score, which is included in the average score. Then we'll watch the vault in slow motion. I may throw in a poll question after each video and slow motion vault just to check how we're doing. So our first vault is vault number 4.15. It is a Yuroshenko layout full with a start value of 995. Okay, so the average score from the 11 evaluators was a 9.3. Start value is a 995. Deductions was, and I'm giving you the deductions that I had because it's hard to explain everybody's deduction when you have these categories like this. But if you notice, you'll see the scores are pretty close. And most of the evaluators all had the same kind of deductions. The differentiation might have been just a little bit different. So we have a 0.05 on the shoulders, 1/10 on height, timing of the twist and cross legs, a total combination of minus 0.15, failure to maintain the stretch, a pike down, 2/10, body position upon the landing with the legs separated also, 2/10, 0.05 in distance, 0.05 in dynamics. Total deductions was minus 0.8 for a score of 9.15 for me. So if we look at it, we're going to look at it in slow motion now. So vault number 2 is vault number 4.07, has a start value of 9.8. Yuroshenko, half on, front tuck off.
It would be lower.
So we have an average score of 9.05, start value of 9.8, have a 10th for shoulders, a 10th for bent arms, a 10th for early tuck, 0.15 in height, 0.05 in body position for the tuck, 0.1 in open, 0.05 in the landing position, 0.2 for the steps on the landing, 0.05 in dynamics for a total of 1.0 and a score of 8.8. So now we'll get to watch it in slow motion. So practice vault number 3 is vault number 4.16. It's a Yurchenko back layout 1.5 twists, and it has a start value of 10.0. Once again, reminder, the bonus rule is not in effect for the NCAA program. Okay, so we have an average score of a 9.65, start value of 10, 0.05 on shoulders, 0.1 on bent arms, 0.05 on height, 0.05 on leg separation, 0.05 on timing of twist, 0.05 on body position on the landing, 0.05 on a small step, for a total of 4/10, and my score is a 9.6, so right in there. Okay, so vault number 4 is vault number 4.16. It is another Yurchenko back layout 1.5 twist, has a start value of 10.0. Okay, so a really nice Yurchenko 1.5 twist. We have an average score of 9.85. Start value 10. Deductions is 0.1 on landing position and 0.05 on a small step. So a total of 0.15 deductions for a score of 9.85. So let's watch it in slow motion.
So we have a question for you, Paul. Did you take a deduction for the arm circle on landing on the balance?
So I have 0.1 on the landing position. So that was for the arm circle and the positioning there, and 0.05 for the step. So I do have a 0.5 blended in there for the landing position. Vault number 5. It's vault number 4.14. And it has a start value of 9.95. I want to talk a little bit about this because on the chart, it's reflected as a layout half. Here it shows as a round off back handspring half front leg. Both the same vault, just a difference in timing of where the twist is done, either for the first part of the apex for the half front or in the second part of the apex for the half layout half. It has the same value of 9.95. Okay, so on that vault number 5, the average from all the evaluators was a 9.4. Start value is a 9.95. 1/10 in head and shoulders, 0.15 in height, 0.1 in body position and leg separation in the layout, 0.05 in body position on landing, 0.2 on steps on landing, for a total of 0.6 with a 9.35. So let's watch it in slow motion. Now our last vault is a Yurchenko layout 1.5. Once again, vault number 4.16, start value 10.0. Okay, so vault number 6, the average was a 9.8, start value of 10.0, 0.05 for head and shoulders, 0.05 for timing of twists, and 1/10 for steps on landing. for a total of 0.2, score of 9.8. Now this one was a really nice vault. I think my biggest separation between this one and the other 985 was the timing of the twist. On this one, everything happened from the apex down on the twisting action. So I would have liked to have seen the twist happen a little bit earlier. So it would be completed at the apex and then, the landing. So let's watch it in slow motion. So you can see it's a really great vault. She does have an issue, a little bit of an issue coming on. She does have a little bit of a shoulder angle, a little bit of head position. Her height is good. Her landing has a small step. Her timing of twist is 0.05. It was all the way on the way down. So that's the only difference I had with between those two vaults. So, and that is all the vaults we have. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I'm hoping I'm okay, Jenna.
You're okay. We're going to have Cookie up next.
Okay, great. So I'll give you one more slide. I have some contact information here in case you have a question. These videos are all on YouTube. And I think this is going to be shared also. So feel free to contact me at any time. And I'm getting ready to turn it over to Cookie. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. I want to start off just by thanking Judy Dobransky. These videos that she actually put up for our 2017 collegiate season, and they were judged then, we downloaded them and put them into clips so that they would work better with this platform, but also we scored them with this year's rules. But the original work on those videos was done by Judy, and she does just a terrific work for us, and it's got so many new projects in the library, so be sure and check that out. Basically, what we're going to do now is just talk about some of the feedback that the coaches have given us in terms of evaluation of judges and some of their observations. This is all going to be in an aggregated form. Lois and I had the opportunity to look at all of the evaluations for the meets that were held last year, and so you know that we had a short season last year, but for our purposes, it's probably good it was because there's a lot of evaluative feedback. The first thing was that in previous years, there had not been a high percentage of respondents. And Heather Perry, the person who heads up the coaches, she's the executive officer for the Coaches Association. She really worked hard this year so that after every meet, she would send reminders to the coaches to please put in their evaluation responses. And as a result, there were 90% of the meets were evaluated by the coaches. I think because we don't usually know what the evaluations are, I was surprised at the high percentage of positive responses. They were very, very positive about our judges for the most part. And I think in talking about the areas here that, or there were some comments made about concerns, the danger is that you may take these comments as over-representing the critical comments, when in fact, keep remembering that most of the responses were very, very, very positive. There wasn't any one event that stood out as having more concern than others. That kind of surprised me. I kind of thought Beam might be, because I saw some comments in the chat box. Beam seems to be a little bit more of a challenge for us to adapt to the rules because there are so many differences. But there really wasn't. As you'll see here, pretty much there was an even number of responses with concerns about specific events. There were about 7 comments about meet refereeing, but I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm going to talk about those at our next session when we talk about meet refereeing. There were other comments about professionalism. Inconsistency probably had the highest number of responses, and there were just multiple of those. And then also what they consider to be bias. And whether or not it's bias or inconsistency, it's a major area of concern for the coaches, not only just from one division to the other, but within their own team as well. So that's something that we'll want to really work on. And the only way we can work on that, of course, is simply be sure to take all the deductions that you see, regardless of who it is, and don't over deduct for teams or athletes that aren't well known. We put the responses into themes, and one of the themes was inaccurate applications of the rule. And as I mentioned when we first started tonight, this tended to happen early in the season. So we saw this comments more on the meets that were occurred in January, and for most of us, that was probably our first meets, even if it was at the end of January. And it was just literally forgetting the new application of the rule. So like the double back in the last pass, getting bonus, some skill value differences on beam were specifically mentioned that the judges made a mistake on, or not getting that one that Linda talked about, the BC dismount beam bonus. So hopefully with the clinics that we're having, you're refreshed with those rules and will be less likely to forget those bonus opportunities. Another interesting theme, and we talked about this with the coaches as well, not just from reading that, they are pretty astute at doing what they say, that the judges are playing a game to try to get their scores to match. And they feel that this happens occasionally. Not, again, remember, these are small numbers of responses, but I made up an example. This is not a real example, and it may not be very good, but let's say on the first vaulter, the first judge has a 9.65, and the second judge has a 9.85. So when they say they're playing a game, they're thinking, oh, Judge 2 thinks she's too high, and Judge 1 thinks she's too low. So then vaulter 2 comes up, and Judge 1 has a 9.75, and Judge 2 goes down to a 9.6. Again, I made up scores for the purpose of the example. Then by the time they get to Judge 3, they're judging the third vault, they're kind of getting in sync. So their message to us was just, be sure you judge and judge consistently, and avoid trying to play this game. Doesn't, again, happen very often, but when it does happen, they seem to notice it. Whether or not that's an accurate perception, that's up for grabs, but that's how they perceive it. Another theme is they felt that some judges turn in their scores so quickly they can't possibly be judging. And so they said, be sure to check for your special requirements and don't rush so much to get your score in. And then don't assume that, particularly the high-level teams, they do typically have 10-0 start values, but they said this year be sure not to assume that, because it's in the year of COVID, they may have athletes who ordinarily would compete on an event that are not going to be able to compete on an event. So they've been training their athletes who ordinarily say wouldn't work beam to be ready to go on to beam if they need to. But it's very possible in some of those cases that they are not going to have 10-0 start values. So be sure to go ahead and go all the way through your checklist. You have to do it quickly so you don't hold up the meet, but be sure and look for all of the special requirements and the up to the level as well. One coach told us that she deliberately puts her athlete that doesn't have an up to the level and should be getting a deduction. She puts her up last because she feels that by that time the judges have gotten used to giving that the routines all have everything they need, and they forget to take that. Again, that's a perception of a coach, but it seemed to work in her favor. So again, the message here is just be sure and take your time to look at your deductions. Another theme of not judging was giving high scores when they weren't deserved. And they said this about their own athletes. So here's some of the comments. And this was a discussion, this was not written in the evaluations. Well, they said after they saw some scores for one of their own athletes, they said, well, that ego is going to be hard to get back into check. She said that she wanted to inquire to lower the score of one of her athletes. And another one said that her athletes didn't have all of her special requirements all season long, and she got by with it about half the time. So just a message to us, be sure and take your time, go through your special requirements, and make sure that you take the deductions when you don't or you're missing it. If you're wrong, you can always conference, so they can inquire and we can fix it. But once you give that score, there's not any way to really take it back. The summary form issues continued as an issue for them, basically that we weren't using the correct procedures. So they had some feedback that the judges didn't complete those independently. And I think that might have been true more at the beginning of the season, because we weren't quite in tune with that we were supposed to not talk to the other judge. But probably by the end of this season, had we had the end of the season, that would have righted itself. But basically, remember that we are supposed to complete those independently and not be talking to our other judge, because they want to see the deductions that each judge took. Another concern about those summary forms was that the deductions didn't match on video replay. When they went and watched it later on, a day or two later, and they tried to match up what was said on the summary form with what was and what they actually saw. My guess is that's more of a problem of us not having enough time to notate sufficiently why we took the deduction, and then we're sitting there having to write down why we did take it. And so I think it's maybe more of a notation problem most of the time rather than a really judging error. But either way, it's something that we need to be sure that we can work hard on trying to get down the reason you took a deduction to the extent that you can. A couple of times they said judges wrote on the summary forms deductions that aren't applicable to NCAA, that they were deductions that are applicable in the age group program, but not in the NCAA. So we just have to make sure that we don't take those deductions, and then also don't write them on the summary form. And then we would sometimes combine deductions to equal a half of a tenth. And I wish we did have quarter tenths. Lois and I have been talking about that, because sometimes a half a tenth is too much, but there's a zero is not, you can't take zero because you see it. So an example of that would have been that a person took half a tenth because the gymnast had bent legs and flexed feet. Well, those are two separate deductions, and where we would think it might be a better deduction to take a half for all of them combined, for both of them combined. We don't have the quarter tenths, so we're not allowed to do that. But we'll see. I'd be curious what you'd think about having to judge in quarter tenths. Now, just reminding you to say great job, because already, remember, these are very few comments about very few judges at very few meets. So most of these comments are positive about the judges. Professional protocol was another theme, though, not arriving at our scores independently and confidently. And this seemed to be more with some judges, specific judges, than others, where there was more of a trend. So they felt that the remediation for this was getting more experience and more practice judging, so that you did feel that more confident in scoring independently, flashing your start value, flashing your UTL, and getting that, just putting it up there and then letting it happen. Whatever happens, happens. Remember, they can always inquire if you're wrong. So don't worry about always being wrong. You just make sure that you are taking your deductions, going through your list, and then displaying your start value and your UTL. Now, this is going to sound like I'm contradicting what I've said before, but there were some concerns that a few judges, just a very few, weren't very timely or efficient in computing their score and held up the meet. So whereas I would say, at one hand, take your time and get your score, you need to balance that with not being so slow that you are holding up the meet. And then they felt that there were just a couple of judges, they felt that demonstrated some behaviors that caused delays that were unnecessary. And that's a pretty big thing for the college meets, not only because of the television audience, that the TV people are trying to keep the meet running, but even for the audience there in the arena. They really want to keep this running. And most importantly, for the athletes who are ready to compete, but then we're getting held up. Not admitting and addressing mistakes. That was something that really bothers those coaches that were vocal. And they said, they understand that we make mistakes. They understand that these routines have rules that are different and a little bit more complex for us. But if we make a mistake, they just like for us to admit it and fix it, and then that's the end of it. They're fine with that. What bothers them is when we have made a mistake, but we refuse to admit that. It doesn't happen often. Again, remember, this is just a one or two kind of comments, but it really gets the intensity of the comment up higher when this kind of a situation happens. They'd like for us to demonstrate body posture and facial demeanor that shows that we're interested in the athletes and attentive to the athletes rather than sitting there like we're really bored. So I don't think we're ever bored judging college meets, but make sure that your body language and your facial demeanor reflect that. They had two complaints about looking. One was looking down while judging, and the other was looking around when you're not judging. So when you're looking down while you are judging, obviously you might miss a deduction, or you might miss something that's done really well, or even a bonus connection. And then looking around when you're not judging, they felt that it was not a professional appearance, and particularly if it looked like you were biased to see how another team was doing. Not dressing professionally was mentioned about a few judges, basically, in terms of not wearing the appropriate kind of type of uniform, professional uniform, not looking disheveled when they walked onto the floor. It's a minor kind of a complaint that we got, not often, but it was one that popped up a few times. One that was discussed openly at the meeting, and it was mentioned in some of the evaluations, was that some judges asked coaches at meets or after meets why they didn't get a regional or a national assignment. And first of all, of course, we need to know that kind of falls within our canon of that comes across as soliciting a meet, which is not part of our canons. But for the most part, these coaches don't know why people didn't get regionals or national assignments. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about that later. But basically, this would be something that really bothered the coaches. If you as a judge ask them why you didn't get regionals or nationals, they feel it's very unprofessional. It puts them on the spot. They thought that maybe just innocently some judges weren't aware of the impact that a half a tenth or a tenth had on the ability of individuals or the team to qualify to regionals. So this came more from the teams that are maybe just trying to make it to regionals. That's their team goal. Or they may have an individual on a team where the team that year didn't do very well, but they have individuals who might qualify for regionals. They asked us to emphasize that the difference of a half a tenth or a tenth on every athlete, if you're a half a tenth or a tenth lower than the athlete or the team usually scores, and there's 20 scores in a meet, and that difference is 1/10 difference in your score times 20 is 2-point difference in the team score. And again, being attentive to the type of deductions that you take and the amount of those, and then being consistent from meet to meet and team to team.
Okay, we're getting some questions about the evaluations. I don't assume that if you get a bad evaluation, will the judges ever get that feedback themselves, or is it always in this general form?
Two parts to that. I'm not certain that in the past we've actually shared the evaluation information, and Lois and I did ask if that would be all right, and if we did that in the aggregate, and they said yes. So that's step one, was that we're doing this presentation to get that out there. Step two, the coaches were surprised that the judges did not get the evaluation feedback, and they don't. So one of the things that it's on the list of to-dos is to work on a process that would allow judges to get this back. Now, they would like that feedback to come in a way in which it is de-identified and in an aggregate. And so the process Lois and I are talking on, and truthfully with all the other issues that have been going on this year, this hasn't had time to address that, but we do plan to address that, is that probably at the midpoint of the season and at the end of the season, the judges will get a summary of their evaluative feedback so that they can make some changes. Because as you can see, some of these things are simply, if you know about it, you wouldn't do it, but you don't know about it. So they're not hard things to fix. And I'm going to address that just a little bit later. We're going to show you, they have a new evaluation process. We'll show you some examples of that too. Okay, the other thing that they wanted to make sure you knew about was the National Qualifying System, the NQS. It used to be the RQS. This may change in 2021 because they're very concerned about the number of meets that they're going to be able to get in this year. It's been an unknown, so it may change. But so I'm going to talk about what it has been historically, and then we'll see if it changes. We can let you know later. But basically, this is the way by which the teams qualify to regionals and nationals, and it's determined at the moment by the best 6 regular season meet scores. No more than 3 of those can be at home. The highest score is dropped, and the remaining 5 scores are averaged, and that's how the teams end up with their rankings. The rationale for dropping some of these scores is that they realize that everybody has a bad meet once in a while. They may have a weak start. Some teams actually start weak, and then they build up. So that's really part of their plan. So they want to be able to drop those meets that are at the beginning. They might have several injuries in a weekend, or they may feel that there's home meet bias. And so that's the reason that they are basing it on, at the moment, on the best 6 regular season meet scores, no more than 3 at home, highest is drop, remaining 5 are average. The competitions are non-divisional, so D1, 2, and 3, although this year 3's having a hard time competing, they're all competing for a berth to the same championship. So keep in mind that there could be some really strong teams and strong athletes in those Division 2 and 3 schools, and they should have the opportunity to advance. This is just the bracket from the last time that we had NCAA Nationals, and I won't go into it in detail, but just so you know how, those of you who don't know, how teams qualify based on their NQS score. There'll be 4 regional meets. In the past, they have had a play-in so that the 2 teams who are the next highest ranked in the grouping of all the teams in the NQS, they compete on Thursday. One of them wins and goes into the 8th spot here. Then you have your 8 teams go to 4 and at the semifinal, and then your 4 go to 2, and you end up with 8 teams at nationals, 2 from each regional. They compete, and then you end up with a final 4 on the floor, is what they like to call it. So just realize that every score that you give is affecting the NQS score for that team and also for that individual, because that's how individual qualifies as well. And again, don't forget, 90% of you did a great job last year. So don't be taking these too personally. Okay, so I said perceived bias and inconsistent scores. And the biggest one here is they felt, of course, the home crowd advantage. Well, we can argue that a home crowd advantage sometimes makes a team perform better. And so they may have higher scores at home because they're performing better. And that one is one that we just have to try to make sure that we stay consistent and don't get caught up with this, with the crowd, but just take the deductions that you see. Athlete reputation is one that really concerns them because they feel that there are some athletes who are well known because of their Olympic reputation or their world championship reputation, and they feel that occasionally these athletes might be being overscored because of that reputation. And they had a couple of instances where they were concerned that the prior affiliation of a judge was either an athlete or a parent might have influenced the scoring. I mentioned already they're concerned about bias within their own team and across teams. So meaning that sometimes they felt that some of their athletes got scored higher than they should have based on athlete reputation, and that they might have been trying to make a point that that athlete needed to work harder on something, but because of her reputation, she got a little overscored. Cross teams, they noticed this in 2 ways. They noticed this with the team that they were competing against, and there were actually some coaches who said they felt that their other team got underscored. Most of the time they said they got overscored, but sometimes they even said, I think that other team got underscored, and that typically happened when it was a team that wasn't as highly ranked. And then consistency across divisions we've alluded to already. So how are we addressing the comments? First of all, we're informing you of the feedback. That's what we think that if people know what coaches are concerned about, you can be particularly attentive to the possibility that you might have some of the behaviors there that were discussed. Most likely not. Remember, 90% of the judges had very positive ratings. We're offering more clinics. Jenna had a wonderful clinic at the beginning of the year here, and she had, I've forgotten, almost 200 people, I think, participated in that. And we're having these clinics this time around. So we're trying to make sure that we don't get rusty and that we can practice judge and go into that very first meet as prepared as if we had been judging all season. We're going to encourage the meet referees to address some of the issues related to the summary forms, the inquiry forms, and professional behavior more when they get together with you in advance during the pre-meet meetings. There's some new evaluation questions that are being developed by the coaches. It's a 5-point scale with 1 being the best. And if they give a judge a rating of 3 or lower, they're required to put in a comment. So it was really difficult to know in a few cases that there were some low scores, but you didn't know why. And so that is not very helpful to the judge or to the people who are trying to help that judge become a better judge. So now they will be required to do that. Our eventual goal is to allow you to see the feedback in the aggregate de-identified way. And it's just literally a matter of having time for Lois and I to work with Jason to come up with a process that we can propose to the Coaches Association. And it's possible we'll get that done this year. It looked a little bit more likely before we got into some of the complications that we've had this particular year. Okay, so I don't know that you can see that, but they haven't finalized this. It's pretty small type, but these were some examples of some of the new questions. I'm going to read them briefly for you so that you have an idea. This first group of questions that will be on the evaluation form are simply yes or no. Did the judge complete and return her contract and travel arrangements in a timely manner? Yes or no? And if you don't do that, please do that, because it's really hard on the business managers, those who have business managers, to try to get everything done. Did the judges follow meet protocol for open scoring? Did they flash their start values and score simultaneously? Yes or no? Did they fill out the routine summaries correctly? Yes or no? Did they fill out inquiries correctly? Yes or no? Did the judge conduct the meeting with confidence and in a timely manner? Yes or no? And would you recommend the judge for NCAA postseason officiating? Yes or no? The answer to that one question right there does play a role in their decision making. One of the things I think they intended to do with this new set of evaluation questions is to try to get the rationale. If somebody said no, why did they say no? And then that's why they have to upload and provide more information. Okay, so now some of the more substantive kinds of questions are along these lines. Do you feel the judge correctly applied the NCAA rule modifications? And they can answer that for their team only, not for another team. Do you feel the judge correctly applied execution and composition deductions? Your team only. Do you feel the entirety of the meet was judged without bias, taking all teams into consideration? And what they have done, and I don't know that I've got the example in here, is they've tried to operationally, here's an example. They've tried to operationally define these so that when whatever the question is, instead of just doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they give some examples that will help provide some consistency from coach to coach about what a 1 is, what a 2 is, what a 3 is, what a 4 is. These are all still being edited, and all the coaches have been so doggone busy again with this COVID situation that they haven't gotten around to doing this. So they're not available for us to share with you. We're going to ask them if we can't share them with you. But again, it's going to be a while before they get around to being able to finish that up. Okay, and our final thoughts, just remember, judge what you see. Take the deductions you see. Someone else is, remember. Score, and that's really for those athletes that they feel are getting overscored. Okay, not at the other end of the continuum, they really think that some of their athletes are getting scored too severely and that we're not coming into alignment with the college deductions. Score the athletes with publicity the same as all other gymnasts. Judge what they do that day. So we may know that we've got the former, world champion on bars or something competing, and she may have a mistake that day. Just because she's the former world champion on bars, don't be hesitant to take that deduction. And this one is just a personal philosophy of mine that I've been talking to the coaches about, and I haven't gotten any negative feedback. When we first knew we were going to the road to nationals, there was with the jazz system, there was a concern that, oh, that would get the judges there and we would be looking at the rankings and that would affect our judging. I actually just don't think that's accurate. I mean, I think for the most part, I think our judges do judge what they see. And I think that's why we have 90% of the evaluations were so positive, is because you did do that. I compare it to other sports, football, basketball, whatever. There's hardly a sport that a referee doesn't go into that they don't know who's ranked number 1, number 2, number 3. Football certainly does. Basketball certainly does. And I really think that we are very professional and we try hard, and we really try very hard to be able to justify our score, and we want good scores. So I think that we are perfectly capable of knowing the rankings and not letting that affect our judgment. If that's not the case, then you need to work on your own behaviors. But I think in general that we're very professional people and we're very capable of separating those rankings and even past history with what we see that particular day. And just remember, you are doing a super awesome and amazing job. Now, Lois is going to join us. Is she on?
Right. She should be here in just a minute. I had to add her in.
Are there any questions in the chat or comments? Yes. Okay. I see Jeanette said to remind coaches what they see in video is different than what we see. Exactly. And we're going to really make that point next week too, because of this meet referee situation that we're talking about. Cookie, what schools are not competing because of COVID? You know what? I really do need Lois. She's got that in her brain. I have to look at a piece of paper. So as soon as she gets on, there are some teams.
She's on, but I can't hear her. I don't know. Lois, can you turn your video on?
All right. I'll answer the last question that just came in first. There are actually 11 schools that are not going to compete this season. Predominantly on the East Coast, Northeast, and we don't know yet about the Wisconsin schools. So the Ivy League schools, Brown, University of Pennsylvania, Cornell, and Yale. We obviously lost Seattle Pacific way back last spring. Westchester just announced it's not competing. Ithaca, Cortland, Rockport, and Alaska. And there are a couple questionable ones. So this is a lot of schools without seasons. And I looked to see for the 2 assigners in the Northeast, they had something like 380 assignments last year. Well, now they're down to 2 schools apiece, or 2 or 3 schools apiece, with some questions. So this is going to make a big difference in terms of the assignments. 2 quick things before I go into the assigning piece. The draft of the evaluation that Cookie was just talking about is on the help section of JAZ. And the compensation document we just posted, which includes the COVID rules, is also in that same place. So if you want to look for the evaluation system, or you want to double check, which you should, the COVID rules, basically we took the statement that USAG was using, that there would be no penalty for either the judge or the meet. But you should read the details on that. I'm not going to get into that anymore. The written test is up. I mentioned in my email, there have been a couple problems with it disappearing. So I suggested at the time that you list your ABC, your actual answers, so that if it does stop or disappear, you can just put them in without reading every question. Okay, the assigning has been chaotic. We're right now at about 6 weeks since we would have started on a normal year. The biggest problem has to do with the virus and the fact that schools were trying to straighten out other sports and determine what kind of seasons they were going to have, or if they were even going to have a season. Some of those schools that dropped their programs for this winter was because the students aren't even in school, so they weren't training. So the question then became, do they train for January and start meets in February So it's been a very difficult situation. And in talking to the coaches, Cookie and I have both heard, even training this fall, they've had situations where someone tested positive for COVID and a big group of the team members had to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So it's a very difficult situation. We postponed the assigning 4 different times based on the recommendation of the coaches. And we started about a week ago with the first 2 weekends in January. So that's January 8th to 18th. So we started on that Monday, and on Tuesday, the rumor went around that 2 of the conferences were not going to have non-conference meets. My assigners heard that. We also heard it through the coaches, but that has not, the final decision on that has not been made, which is making it very difficult to do the assigning, even of those first 2 weekends. The rumor is that the Big Ten, and the SEC are going to conference-only meets. That means if they were scheduled to meet a non-conference team, even in those first 2 weeks in January, those meets are being changed. So we set out to do those first 2 weekends and are only able to do about a dozen of them. And most of those have been done. One of the other tweaks with the JAS system, actually, Cookie and I have been working on this since spring, and it constantly has little oddities that come up. Well, the newest one was that you weren't getting the email you've traditionally gotten to say, please go in and accept a meet. So you should go into the system. This has been fixed, but go into the system and make sure that you didn't get an assignment that you haven't had a chance to accept. Remember, we're supposed to start the Monday after Thanksgiving with the full schedule. And as in past years, every assigner doesn't start on the same date. So you might get a meet in March, and you shouldn't be thinking, oh, it's my only meet. So the assigners will be rotating as they have in the past. But we're also doing the assignments in a much tighter time span than we usually do. The conference meets will get assigned along with the late January, February, March meets, but we're losing conferences. So that's still up in the air in terms of that whole process. We normally have about a dozen invitationals, and those are meets that are age group and college that we assign. This year we're down to 5. And because of the impact of the non-conference rule, some of those aren't assigned yet. Several of them are, and thank you to those who have responded. Just so you have some idea of what we're talking about, last year there were 2,100 assignments for judges. They're talking about us being at about 70%, which takes that down to about 1,500 assignments. But it's a guess as to how many meets there will be. If you're a new judge, this isn't good news, but we encourage you to go practice judge if there's a meet near you. And if COVID comes along, maybe you'll get pulled in as an alternate on those meets. I'm sure you have questions. Please feel free to email me, or we can bring them up and talk about them for everybody in 2 weeks when we have the next clinic. I thank you for your patience, your flexibility, and adaptability. This has been a difficult 6 weeks. And there will be gymnastics meets, but we don't know when or where at this point. So we're doing the best we can. And this also means that the 11 assigners have had to redo the schedule because they work offline before the dates actually appear. So I have to thank them for all the extra work they've done and their patience, because they didn't expect to be assigning in November. They expected it would be all done. So please send me your questions if you have them. Everybody's been doing that anyway. And be patient and stay healthy. Please stay healthy. Thank you.
Well, we definitely want to thank Lois, but also thank all those assigners. I have on this part of it, where I was more active in working on the system, I've really been watching from the outside all the frustrations because Los has had to do the schedule over 4 times for assigning, and then the assigners they're all ready to go, and then she has to tell them not to go. So we really appreciate them as well. And please don't think that if you're not getting meets, it's because you did something wrong or you're not good or that the designers aren't being fair or they're being biased. For the most part, the first 3 rounds are pretty much local judges. So geographically this year, if you don't live close to a university, your opportunity to get meets is actually going to be less. And it has nothing to do with you not being a great judge, or it has nothing to do with that you did something wrong. It just has something to do with the fact that they need local judges. I want one other clarification. The reason they're thinking about competing only within their conference is much has to do with the protocols. Conferences develop protocols for safety, and they have to follow those. And if they have non-conference teams, other conferences may have other protocols for safety, and they won't match up. And so the way that they've come to decide in some cases is the easiest thing and the best thing for them to do is stay conference only. So it's really not trying to compete geographically, because if you look at a lot of the conferences, that doesn't make sense geographically. It's literally about the protocol for safety. And one last important thing, and this is something that is really important, I didn't mention anything about social media because in truth it didn't come up in the evaluations, but it has come up in some other situations. Please stay off of social media related to college. That if you're on your way to judge at University of X, don't post that. Don't say, oh, I just did a great meet at University of Y. Please don't single out athletes as either being particularly good or particularly this or particularly that. That's sacred territory for us. We need to stay away if we're going to preserve our appearance of being non-biased and not interfere at all with the college aspect of gymnastics except for judging. That's all we're supposed to do, go and judge the meets. We will maybe have some more time next time to continue this. If not, maybe we'll schedule just a question and answer session when the 2 sessions are over so that we can answer more questions and keep you up to date as we get more up to date. There are changes that are still being considered. And as those changes get known, of course, you'll be notified through the appropriate vehicles, probably the newsletter that is posted on the NAJ website.
The next session is December 13th at 7 p.m., December 13th. And you should be able to sign up via the NAJ website. I'm sure there'll be some emails sent around before it happens as well, but I just want everybody that's still on to have that date in mind.
Thank you so much for coming and participating, and we appreciate the nice comments that we see in the chat. It's always interesting to do a new platform, and I did see a comment that they thought that this platform seemed to work probably the best of all that we've had so far in terms of the video quality. So thank you, Jenna, for offering us the opportunity to work with you on this. Okay, we'll see you all in a couple of weeks, hopefully.